You're listening to Southern Fried Sports with Travis Reier on Tide 100.9 in Tuscaloosa. This is Southern Fried Sports with Bama Online senior analyst Travis Reier on your home for Alabama sports. Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
If I make it through this year, I think I'm gonna put this bottle down. I guess as time goes on, I'll grow to miss it less than I will now. And I think I'm gonna tell her that I'm gonna go away for a while, till I can get this demon out.
It is 11 a.m. on a beautiful Tuesday morning here in Tuscaloosa. I'm Jacob Harrison filling in for the one and only Travis Reier here today on Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide sports. Got plenty to get into today. Going to replay my interview last night with Tyler Martin on my show Off the Edge, which is featured Mondays and Fridays here on Tide 100.9 from 7 to 9 p.m. But before we get into any of those sorts of things, do need to remind you that the show, as always, is brought to you by Peterbrook Chocolatier, 1530 McFarland Boulevard, as you're headed into Northport right there on the left. Go check out Peterbrook Chocolatier to make sure that Father's Day goes off without a hitch for your father, for the father in your life, whatever he may be into. We all love chocolate, but there's plenty going on at Peterbrook. Whether it's the Handprints for Dad Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays this week from 12 to 2 p.m., or it's chocolate day camps Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 3. Bring your own bottle Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. Gelato and frozen treats. Father's Day's gifts on the daily. Give them a call, 205-752-0211 to get more information on how you can make this year's Father's Day extra sweet. You can also call in to this show via the Peterbrook Chocolatier hotline, 205-342-9904. I'd love to hear from you concerning all things Bryce Young as well. We've got plenty to get into as far as that goes. Again, last night on my show, I went very, very in-depth on Bryce Young, and we talked to Tyler Martin towards the end of the show to get his thoughts on Bryce, and he said something that was very interesting. I had narrowed down kind of the bits and pieces of Bryce Young's abilities, whether it was his scrambling ability reminding me of Johnny Manziel, or it was his arm talent, the ability to throw from awkward positions, those sorts of things, reminding me of a guy like Matthew Stafford. The way that he throws the deep ball with such snappiness and decisiveness remind me a little bit of Aaron Rodgers. Those sorts of things, which it should be noted that to compare those sorts of things in his games to guys like that are that good is I don't do that lightly. You know what I mean? Like it's that impressive what Bryce Young does on the field. Just watching what's available to us as far as A-Day, as far as the games that he played in last year in some mop-up duty, whether it's his high school highlights, those sorts of things that you can get your hands on, you can see the excitement that this kid brings to the table and what he's fully capable of doing now that the reins have been handed off to him. But something that Tyler Martin talked about, and we weren't able to get into it too deeply after he mentioned it, but was talking about how Bryce Young reminded him of Russell Wilson, who's another guy who's a little on the short side. If he's 6 foot tall, it's because of his hair. Short, stocky guy. Bryce is a tad bit thinner, but he has put on the weight a little bit more in his first year at Tuscaloosa, and certainly within the next 2 years he'll be able to put on a little bit more as well as he prepares for the next level, which is of course the end goal for everyone that walks into the Malmore complex here on Bryant Drive. But nonetheless, I thought that was really really a spot-on comparison for as far as all of his tools being put together. And there's certain things that I feel like Bryce does a tad bit better than Russell Wilson ever did, and of course there's things that Russell Wilson does that are on a completely another plane because he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And as far as what Russell Wilson does better, it's the deep ball. Russell Wilson's is probably the best deep ball thrower in the entire NFL. Deadly accurate, and he's got he's got guys like DK Metcalf that get down the field with absolutely zero problem. But he routinely hits those guys in strides, or gives them a jump ball that really plays into the favor of his target. He's very good at those things. Tyler Lockett, another guy that streaks down the seam a lot out of the slot. So Russell Wilson has a lot of advantages in those situations, but nonetheless, the rainbow arc in his passes, the up and down motion that the ball goes through when it comes out of the hands of Russell Wilson, there's no denying that fact. But Bryce Young is a better scrambler than I think Russell Wilson ever was. And, Russell came into the NFL, third-round draft pick. Not a lot of people gave him any credence, kind of overlooked him, didn't take him too seriously. And then he wins the job in the preseason, and it has a lot to do with his accuracy, his arm. But what he did that was exciting, and remember this is the same, 2 years removed from Cam Newton busting onto the scene, and RG3 had just won Rookie of the Year, or was in this season that RG3 won Rookie of the Year. So the option quarterback was coming into play and was playing a big role. And, now that's sort of an average thing. No team relies on that so heavily anymore. Defenses have evolved to be able to sniff that out and handle it. More often than not, it's just handle the quarterback aspect of it, and the running back will take care of itself. If your defensive lineman can stuff the gaps, you let your linebackers run free at the quarterback, that tends to solve those problems. So Bryce isn't necessarily going to be running a lot of option plays. You're not going to see a lot of designed quarterback runs, I don't think, for Bryce Young. It has a lot to do with his size, but it also has to do with the way the game has evolved. All your advantages come in the passing game. That's why every team throws the ball all the time, and it's understandable. And Bryce is able to maneuver pockets and use his athleticism to his advantage to make sure that he can get out, he can see through a window, and he can deliver a ball with zip and with accuracy. And that's what he does so impressively is he knows to climb the pocket. He knows not to just escape immediately at the first sign of pressure. He handles pressure well in the pocket. Now, I mean, there's times where he gets overwhelmed and he literally can't see where to go, and that's all part of it. Every player has his advantages and disadvantages, because when he gets out into the open field and he's got to make a defensive lineman miss, he's fully capable of doing it. He can make defenders look downright silly, and that's an advantage that he brings to the table that not a lot of other quarterbacks can. And when it comes down to that, that's why I think that he can be the most exciting quarterback to ever step foot and play here at Alabama. You go down the list, especially during the Nick Saban era. It's a lot of guys that never even got a look in the NFL, whether it's Greg McElroy or John Parker Wilson, Blake Sims, Jake Coker. These guys got barely a sniff in the NFL, not nary a chance. And then you kind of go to A.J. McCarron, who's still in the NFL, got a lot of experience as a backup, could probably do some good for a team if he was given an opportunity to be a full-time starter, I think. No team would be detrimented because he was the starter. And then you kind of level up and you evolve into what Alabama's had here lately with Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, and Mac Jones. Certainly three of the better quarterbacks that have ever stepped foot on this campus, but especially during the Nick Saban era, they're the special ones. They're the ones that play the position with a different style of moxie. They made more impacts on the games than the players around them in a lot of situations. Now, of course, Jalen, Tua, Mac, they all had their help. Whatever way you want to look at it, they all had great receivers. They all had great running backs. They all played behind great offensive lines. And they all had good defenses on the other side, except for Tua. Tua was never granted that luxury. But with Bryce, he's got probably one of the best defenses we've seen in a good 4 or 5 years here at Alabama. But there's questions on the offensive line. There's questions in what the rotation is going to be at running back. There's questions in what the wide receiving core is going to look like, who his favorite target is really going to be. We haven't seen him throw the ball to John Mechie, really. I mean, sure, there's times in some spot duty, some mop-up duty last year where maybe he had a few targets to John Mechie, but, I mean, we haven't really seen him take advantage of a full and healthy offense, and you're not going to see that much today anyway, going back a few months ago to the first opportunity we had to see him as the starting quarterback. But when it all comes down to it, what sets him apart from DJ Uiagalelei, what sets him apart from Emory Jones, Matt Corral, CJ Stroud, Sam Howell, hell, even Spencer Rattler out in Oklahoma, who's the Heisman favorite by not a crazy margin. Bryce Young and DJ Uiagalelei just 200 points behind, but a plus 500 favorite. He's probably going to remain the favorite for most of the season. But when you look at what Bryce can do compared to all these guys, is create special. It's to create something special on the field and avert your eyes to what he's doing. Now, a lot of this is stuff that it's going to take time to develop, take time to see it really come to fruition. But I'm telling you, when it comes to that Miami game, and D'Eriq King, fully capable of creating special himself too, but D'Eriq King's never played anybody like an Alabama defense, and certainly there's reasons to feel confident about heading into Atlanta at the start of September and just laying it to the Hurricanes. But Bryce Young has a lot to do with it. It's not just the defensive side of the ball. It's not just because Will Anderson's unblockable or Malachi Moore can change a game, or the fact that Christian Harris and Henry To'oTo'o are two of the best inside linebackers you could possibly ask for, and they're on the same defense. All of that plays a role, but when you've got the quarterback, that's what sets you apart. And like we were talking about with Gary a bit earlier, when it comes down to it, I know we haven't seen Bryce Young in the game, go out and win an SEC game. We've seen that out of DJ Uiagalelei. But if you're really going to stop and think about it, and I had to do it myself because I was unjustifiably skeptic of what Bryce brought to the table. And I've been open about it. When it comes to the 2023 NFL Draft, if the Steelers are in a position to need a quarterback, my first thought goes to DJ Uiagalelei. I want the 6'4", 250-pound quarterback. I lean that way. I prefer that, but it doesn't mean that that's the only way to do it. But we've also seen him. We saw him go into South Bend and almost pull out the victory over Notre Dame. We saw him handle the other games on Clemson's schedule when Trevor Lawrence was not available, and hold Clemson up to the tier that it belongs in. And we didn't get to see that out of Bryce Young. And that's a good thing, right? Because even though we saw that out of Mac Jones, it still didn't convince anybody that Mac Jones was the real deal, that Mac Jones could be a first-round quarterback. There was a few of us, that were optimistic about what Mac Jones could bring to the table. But the same thing comes now with Bryce Young. And Nick Saban said it a few times. The one thing that he wishes that he could have had last year was more opportunity to put Bryce Young in the game to get him more experience. But you didn't have basically the cupcake preseason games that Alabama has this year, like your Mercers and Southern Misses and New Mexico States. And that was fine. We still got to see a little bit of Bryce Young, but nothing to really let the cat out of the bag and let you know exactly what was going on as far as what he brings to the table. But at the end of the day, when you really look at it, you really analyze, you look back to high school, you look at what he did last year in that spot duty, you look at what he did in A-Day, there's still a continuous, build to Bryce Young. He's continuously getting better, and you can kind of see it in the subtle nuances. He can run through the mechanics of a play and be on time and be accurate and decisive with the football, and that's what you need to be successful. But when you look at it across the board, all of these guys are coming in, and they're already ready to play. That's why DJ Uiagalelei was able to do that with Clemson last year. It's not just because of all the talent around him. It certainly helps. But when DJU's already ready to be the quarterback and take over for Trevor Lawrence, then that says a lot. If you go turn on the film and watch C.J. Stroud in the Ohio State game, A-Day game, or excuse me, spring game for the Buckeyes. That really shows you, like, he's already ready. And guys like Sam Howell, when they stepped in, Spencer Rattler stepped in as a freshman. There's reason to believe that all of these guys are successful in college football. There's no reason that it shouldn't happen for Bryce Young too. Sure, there are busts. I was watching a video with the bald guy from ESPN, and he's talking about how we don't have anything to go off of, and I'm not going to take the thoughts of what he did in high school in California, as if he didn't go to the most storied program in the entire state in Mater Dei. And acting like all these things don't matter simply because we don't have a proven case of him being successful. Well, you had a proven case for Mac Jones against Auburn. You had a proven case for Mac Jones against Michigan. And yet we all walked into 2020 completely oblivious to the idea that Mac Jones could be one of the 5 best quarterbacks in all of college football and eventually be a first-round draft pick. And yet Bryce Young actually comes in with expectations. Bryce Young actually comes in with the thought that he should be one of the 2 best quarterbacks in the nation within the next 2 or 3 years. And because we've already gotten to see DJU, Uiagalelei, out on the field, then we automatically crown him because we've seen it, and we automatically become skeptical of Bryce Young because we haven't gotten the opportunity to see it. And how often? I mean, and wants to compare that entire situation to Blake Barnett, because of all the 5-star quarterbacks Alabama's ever had, we have to immediately think of the worst one, right? And not to look at the fact that when Blake Barnett failed, Jalen Hurts rose to the occasion and became a great quarterback. So it's not like Alabama is ever in a situation where the guy that you want to succeed fails and the next guy up isn't ready. That's very, very few and far between for Alabama, even in prominent positions. And look, over the past few years with the pass rushers, it didn't work out for a while. The number 1 guy in the recruiting class would come in. He wouldn't even make it to the regular season before he was out on the street. And now you've got Will Anderson and Chris Allen and Braswell behind him and Drew Sanders behind him and all these guys behind them that are ready to go. It works itself out, but there's no reason to be at all skeptical about what Bryce Young brings to the table. And honestly, the more I look at it and the more I think about it, I think that there's a real shot for him to win the Heisman because of all the things that he brings to the table, how exciting he is to watch, but also the fact that there's so many unproven commodities around him. There are draft scouts that are not sold on Evan Neal as a left tackle. John Mechie is a first-round wide receiving talent, but he's not the number 1 wide receiver on many boards. The running back room is so crowded. Jaleel Billingsley is going to have to fend off Cameron Latu. So there's a lot of things that play into the favor for Bryce Young to seem like an offensive savior for this team because of all the turnover. And a lot of times all it takes is the optics, because for Mac Jones last year, even though he finished 3rd in the Heisman race, a lot of that came down to the fact that Najee Harris scored 30 touchdowns last year. A lot of that came down to the fact that Devontae Smith had one of the greatest seasons we've ever seen. A lot of that came down to him playing behind the best offensive line that Alabama's probably ever seen in its storied history, So things can work out for Bryce Young, I think, in that regard. He's smart with the football. He's accurate with the football. He's consistent with the football. And when all that starts to add up and comes together, if you can handle Texas A&M and Ole Miss this year, who are the 2 teams that I think are the big threats to Alabama, you do your business against the rivals in LSU and Auburn. You handle Florida now that they're in a transition year as well, which I think that's going to be an incredible game too. I think they're a threat to an undefeated run for Alabama too. Then a lot of things play into Bryce Young's favor to legitimately be a Heisman Trophy candidate alongside Spencer Rattler and DJ Uiagalelei, who are both going to put up fantastic numbers, who are both going to run roughshod over their conferences, and who are both going to end up in the college football playoffs this year. And Bryce Young has a much tougher road than either of those guys do to the college football playoff. I strongly believe because of the turnover. But if he can pull that off, then he seems like a savior and he's going to be the most exciting quarterback that Alabama's put on the field, that I don't think there's going to be all these questions like there were about Tua or like there were about Mac Jones. I feel like this is one of those situations where the Alabama fatigue maybe goes away a little bit, and fans actually flock to see Bryce Young. Fans actually enjoy watching Bryce Young despite what colors he's wearing. And, for so often it feels like there's always something about an Alabama quarterback that turns the rest of the nation off to his abilities nationally. And whether it's fair or not, who knows, who cares? But I strongly believe that based off of these circumstances, based off the skill set that Bryce Young brings to the table, there's no reason he shouldn't be the first quarterback to win the Heisman Trophy at the University of Alabama. And I think anybody that turns on the film and analyzes it and analyzes the situation should probably feel quite similar in that fact. But we'll take a break. We'll come back, and we'll take a listen at the interview I had with Bama Central's Tyler Martin. Last night we broke down the Bryce Young situation with him being the full-time starter at quarterback for Alabama this year. We also looked at the CFP playoff expansion. We'll dive into all that on the other side of this break. This is Southern Fried Sports. I'm Jacob Harrison filling in for Travis Reier, and we'll be right back for more right here on Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports.
The Alabama football countdown clock is driven by Crawford Insurance, Tuscaloosa's low-cost auto insurer. Call 752-6489 for a free quote today.
Roll Tide! Roll Tide!
There are 81 days until Alabama football. Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
Lots of sunshine today, not as humid as recent days. The high for this afternoon around 90. Clear and pleasant tonight, the low 62. And we stay dry tomorrow and Thursday. Lots of sunshine both days. Highs between 86 and 89 degrees. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 89 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
Tide 100.9. For more coverage of Alabama football, visit us at Tide100.9.com or download the free Tide 100.9 app.
The Crimson Tide will not be denied.
Here in this darkness that I lay, depression heavy in its way, and how my body hates to leave to sing its final eulogy. My sons, I love you evermore, and though the road beckons once more, I see the damage that I've done and search for redemption.
Tyler, what's going on, man?
Hey, what's up, Jacob? Glad to be back on here, man. Hope you're enjoying your summer, man. Hope you guys are doing good at Tide 100.9. Glad to be back on here talking some Alabama football.
Yeah, it's been some time. A lot has happened since the last time we spoke. I hope all is going well with you as well. I mean, we're in the throes of the offseason now, so it's kind of, settle on a take and bring it to the show and hope that it sticks and you can stay passionate about it, But today it's been Bryce Young, and it hasn't been that difficult because it turned on the old YouTube film today and just kind of soaked in what he's capable of. And I kind of said this in the last segment. I was a little bit unjustifiably skeptical of what he could do because we'd already seen DJ Uiagalelei and how special he could be. But man, this Bryce Young guy. There's so many people that doubt him, and after today, I'm kind of seriously questioning the sanity of anybody that does.
Yeah, I think last year, too, just in the spots he got into, right, it might have been in garbage time, or I think his most memorable moment from last year was the Kentucky game when he threw that touchdown pass to Devontae Smith on that slant route, and he led them on a drive. They basically went 80 yards, basically went down the length of the field, and got a touchdown and put that game away. And just, there were some moments last year where, he looked like a freshman, right? And two, I'll say this. When Bryce Young was in the game, the offensive line blocking for him was not the offensive line blocking for Mac Jones, right?
Right.
So there was a lot of times where he was kind of running for his head, or running for his life, running around like a chicken with his head cut off. But I'll say this. Bryce Young, what I think has been so developed, for him that's been great to see developed is his body, right? I think the biggest knock coming into college was his size, right? And it was his arm strength. And you can tell, I mean, just in this new strength and conditioning program he's been a part of, 2 fourth quarters now, programs in the spring, he looks the part, right? He's got the size, he's got the arm talent. Now, I think also another big part of his game is the accuracy. In the A-Day game especially, when he was throwing bullets to Trayshawn Holden. I mean, those were just BBs coming out of his arm. I mean, how quick he gets that ball out. And he's going to kind of have to this year, right? Alabama's got some moving pieces on that offensive line. There's going to be some new faces on there, so he's got to be ready for that. But this kid, I mean, when you told me we were talking about Bryce Young, I started thinking about it, Jacob. I'm like, it's similar to me how impressed I was when Tua got first on campus, and you kind of heard about what Tua was doing, right? Now he was turning heads, right? And here's the thing: Bryce Young is from Mater Dei High School in California, and if anybody knows anything about prep football, and especially in the state of California, Mater Dei is like the Alabama of California high school football. And there has been a legacy of quarterbacks go through there, starting with Matt Leinart, the late Colt Brennan, J.T. Daniels. And guess what? Bryce Young at the high school level was better than all of them. He has found Mater Dei's best quarterback ever. And so he knows what pressure is like. He knows what it's like to be, just have the feeling, okay, you're the Alabama quarterback on you. And I think he's going to handle that really, really well. And the best thing about him, too, is just the leadership ability. I'll say this. Mac Jones really won that team over last year. I think a lot of people on that team said, we're going to rally behind Mac Jones. I think Bryce Young has that intangible already with him. Mac has developed that over 3 years. And, being childish at times when he first got on campus, but that's like everybody, right? But Bryce Young had that already when he got on campus. That's where I think kind of where they're separated at their respective parts of their development.
And Coach Saban says it all the time. You got to win the team to be the quarterback, and without a doubt, the team clearly loves Bryce Young, and for good reason. Real quick on this one, but the photo kind of surfaces the other day, late last week, of him looking downright puny next to 2 other quarterback, competitors at a camp here in Tuscaloosa. We're not that far removed from Kyler Murray, but, this entire Alabama fan base cracked their own jokes about Kyler Murray and his size. And when Bryce Young's out there, he doesn't necessarily look tiny compared to the rest of the Alabama roster, but it's noticeable. It's noticeable that he can't, work shallow over the middle. It's noticeable in some timing routes that try to take advantage of zone coverage in shallow routes. Do you think at all that his size is going to hamper him here in the SEC? Because that at least was something that Kyler Murray had going for him in the Big 12. I know he's flourished in the NFL, but in the Big 12 he was really able to take advantage of a lower level of competition. And here in the SEC, it's completely different for Bryce Young.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I saw that photo too, Jacob, and I'll tell you this, guys. I mean, he got bigger. He was smaller when he was a senior in high school coming out in December of 2019. He was smaller than that. So there has been progress made, of course. But I don't think it's going to be an issue at all because I think the cerebral part of his game above the neck, I think he's really, really talented. And that's where guys like that, they have to make up for something, right? They have a lack of size in some area. They have to make up somewhere. And I think where he makes it up is just his mind. And he can beat you in just the way he reads defenses. And, too, let's think about this, right? Steve Sarkisian last year and the last 2 years, one of the best offensive minds Alabama's ever seen, right, on his coaching staff with him and Lane Kiffin up there, too. Bill O'Brien is going to dial up a lot of reads that are going to be really friendly to Bryce Young, right? I don't think Bill O'Brien's going to put him in a lot of situations to where he's going to have to take a lot of chances. I really don't. I think this is going to be a great quarterback-friendly system he's a part of with Bill O'Brien. And with with the accuracy, to me, that's one of the pros of his game coming out was just the accuracy. And he still got it. We saw it in A-Day here and there. And I just think I don't think the size is going to be too much of a factor because of the other intangibles there. And too, I mean, we look at some other smaller quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield as well. He was in Oklahoma, Drew Brees, of course. But yeah, I don't think the size is going to hamper him because of what Alabama's going to be able to do around him and how quickly they're going to be able to get the ball out to a lot of their guys. I mean, this is kind of why they went out and got a Jamison Williams from Ohio State, right? a track star type guy, a guy who can beat you down the field, a guy who can beat you one-on-one in a slant route. Bryce Young can get the ball to him, like a laser. He can put it on a dot, and I think that's where they're going to kind of overcome if there is any size disadvantage.
Yeah, that arm strength was something that I was pretty impressed with today when I was watching the A-Day game back. He's got a tight release, and he's got some zip on it. I think his arm's a tad bit stronger than what Tua had, which would no doubt make him the strongest arm quarterback that Nick Saban's ever had. But in that regard, and I'll give you some time to try to think about this, but what quarterback does Bryce Young remind you of? While I was looking, his scrambling ability reminded me of Johnny Manziel, where it seems frantic, but he's in full control and he knows how to lure those defensive linemen in and make them look incredibly foolish. The way that he's able to throw in awkward positions reminds me a lot of Matt Stafford. His ability to make things happen out on the perimeter, plenty of shovel passes on the perimeter to guys standing on the sidelines, very Brett Favre-ish. Aaron Rodgers and his downfield accuracy. I can't pin him down on one guy, but he certainly has a lot of attributes that remind you of other players. Is there any one guy that Bryce Young kind of reminds you of?
You're putting it really into perspective, Jacob. I mean, he's a mixture. He's like a melting pot, right, of a lot of different guys. He kind of picks and chooses. It's kind of like a build your own quarterback, right?
Right.
Like we go to Build-A-Bear, it's kind of like build your own quarterback, and then you have Bryce Young. He has so many different great utensils. But I think Kyler Murray, I think who you mentioned earlier, it is an accurate comparison. I think Kyler might be maybe an inch shorter, but I do think that they both have super, super quick releases. And, too, they're so quick on their feet. They can avoid the pressure when the pocket collapses. I think Kyler is a fair comparison as well. I think I would go more toward Kyler, just in my opinion.
I think if Kyler didn't have his own unique way of scrambling, because I can only see Johnny Manziel, and Kyler Murray is so unique. I always say that his legs look like Roadrunners, the cartoons where it's just circles because he's so fast. But everything else, I can see that with Kyler Murray. Well, with Kyler Murray, and we're talking to Tyler Martin of Bama Central at Steven Tyler 15 on the Twitter account. Kyler Murray won a Heisman. 1 year at Oklahoma, wins the Heisman. Now, outside of Kyler Murray, you have to go all the way back to Jameis Winston for the first year starting quarterback of a team winning the Heisman Trophy. Everybody else in between that was a quarterback that won. Had been the starting quarterback for multiple years. Obviously, Bryce Young goes into his first season, and a few weeks back, some odds dropped from Bet Online, and Bryce Young was tied for second with DJ Uiagalelei at plus 700 behind Spencer Rattler, who of course is going to be the favorite until he doesn't win it, I guess. But he is ahead of C.J. Stroud, J.T. Daniels, Derek King, Sam Howell, Keaton Slovis, some pretty big names. And I went on. My hot take of the night, I guess, was saying that I think that Bryce Young could be the most special quarterback to walk through these halls under the Nick Saban tenure, and that would mean being the first quarterback to win a Heisman here at Alabama. Whether it's this year or not, who knows? There's a lot of questions, on the outside with the wide receivers, offensive line, all those sorts of things with the turnover that's here at Alabama on offense. But what's kind of your thought processes when it comes to Bryce Young and the individual success that he can have here at Alabama?
Well, first, I do think he's obviously got the chance to be the best. I really do, because he's going to have 2 seasons really to kind of prove it, go out there and really just do his thing before he heads off to the NFL, which is the inevitable. But for him to be the best, man, and I've told a lot of people this recently, because we just had a series on we still are going an ongoing series on our site where we're ranking the top 5 in each position group in football, and we did quarterbacks. And just looking at it, Mac Jones had the greatest season in college football history, and that's going to be pretty hard to live up to. And I definitely believe Bryce can do it. But here's the reality: is that Mac Jones, what a lot of people. You mentioned Bryce having a lot of doubters, things like that. Let's go back to this time last year. Mac had a lot of doubters as well, and he goes up and puts up the greatest season we have ever seen. And we just thought Joe Burrow put it up, but then Mac said, "I'm gonna go be better," right? And for Bryce Young, I think for him, Also, too, I was thinking about this when you were talking. Another comparison, Russell Wilson. I don't know if you see him at all as well.
Oh, yeah.
Too. Russell Wilson as well comes to mind. But for me, I think for him to go down as the best, he's got to win the Heisman, no doubt about it. There's no question. But as long as he wins a national title, he's going to be up there, right? He's going to at least be top 4, top 5 if he wins the national championship. And here's the thing. Last year, we're looking at the offense, and we're going, okay, and I wrote a column on this. I said Alabama more than likely is going to have this was back in July of last year. I said Alabama's more likely going to have 2 Heisman finalists. And guess what? They had darn near 3 in the top 5. And so this year, you look at Alabama's offense, you say, well, really there's one guy who's going to be the show, and it's going to be Bryce Young. And there's a lot of pressure on his shoulders. And as we said, I mean, he's cerebral enough and mature enough to handle that. But this is a season where he can kind of do it, right? I mean, you've got DJ Uiagalelei at Clemson, Spencer Rattler as well. But I think, just given the schedule, too, and just the grinder of the SEC, if he can go out there and lead Alabama to another undefeated regular season and then maybe beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, a team that is going to, to beat Georgia this year, you're going to have to move the football. You're going to have to score in the 40s. And so I just think Bryce has got a great shot to do it. I think he'll be a finalist. I'll go on record right now and say that he's like, if there's anything that's a lock, I think he's a lock to be a finalist just because he is going to be the offense to start it out because there's so many things we don't know about. But I like his chances, and there, talk about the other quarterback awards, the Davey O'Brien, the Maxwell, things like that. I think he's got a great shot for it, but he's also a good kid, and he's not going to let any pressure or any accolades get to his head. That's just that's just how he was brought up, and got great family, great parents, and I know everybody's expecting big things from him. But let's be clear here. When we start out in Atlanta against Miami, that Miami pass rush is going to be very, very good, and Alabama's going to be getting a new tackle in there unless Chris Owens kicks out to tackle. So he's going to be dealing with some pressure from day one, literally on the field, off the edge with the Miami Hurricanes.
There you go.
But I think the sky's the limit for him in 2021 if they can find an identity. That's what it boils down to. The offense has got to find that identity.
Hey, the best guests get the roll credits in there. Get the off the edge plug in there. But you're talking about good parents, good kid. Reminds me of recruiting. And before we get into the CFP expansion, I do have to ask you about Arch Manning because I'm a massive fan. Just the last name in and of itself, I was a Peyton Manning guy over Tom Brady until it just became painfully obvious that it was Tom Brady all along. I'm a big fan of what the Mannings do, the way they get it done, the cerebral assassin style play that they have, to stick in the film room and take coaching and apply it has always been massively impressive to me. But with Arch Manning, he comes from Cooper. He doesn't come from either of his uncles, so he's got the athleticism to boot. We had a caller earlier that said he reminds him more of Archie than anybody, and I can agree with that to a point. But he's got the deep ball like Peyton. He's got the smarts like Eli. I feel pretty good about him as a prospect. But how should Alabama fans feel about him being a Crimson Tide prospect?
Before I answer that, Jacob, I'm so glad. I turned on First Take the other day, and Stephen A. Smith was asking, is he going to be better already than Peyton and Eli? So I'm glad you didn't ask me that. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure for the kid, man, to say, are you going to be better than two Hall of Famers? And yes, Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So yeah, he's obviously got huge shoes to fill, right? But in terms of his recruitment, man, this is going to be a wild one. I think this is going to shape up to kind of be the celebrity-style recruitment we've seen from some big-name prospects over the years. I think of a lot of legacies. I think of Pat Surtain, just from, the class of 2018. Just comes to mind a lot of these NFL legacy kids, just because, hey, like, this is, everybody wants it. They want to get in that gene pool, right? And so Alabama has built a great relationship with him. Over even when it got passed off from Steve Sarkisian to Bill O'Brien, there was a good transition there. And now Texas is coming hard after him. I know that because Steve recruiting him at Alabama, that's shifted over to Texas now too. But I think Alabama fans should be cautiously optimistic here, right? Because guess what? Alabama's always going to be in the play because they're the winners, right? They're in the playoff every single year, especially now with the expanding as well, which we'll get to. They're more than likely going to be in it every single year from here on out. And so what kids like Arch have grown up, and I, it's kind of crazy for me to think this. I'm a little older now, but when I talk to recruits, it's like all they've known growing up is that Alabama this, Alabama that. And so Arch has seen that. Arch has built a great relationship. He'll be in town later this month, and that's going to be he's going to camp there. He's going to work out. I saw some highlights from Clemson, and man, he looked really sharp. He looked really good. And he dropped a 70-yard bomb at the Texas camp to one kid just right down the sideline. I mean, it was a drop in the bucket. But yeah, this is shaping up for a celebrity-style recruitment. But in my opinion, I think Crimson Tide fans should be cautiously optimistic. Now, Ty Simpson is locked in, in 2022. He'll be an earlier enrollee, but Alabama's going to look to get another star signal caller in 2023, and I think Arch Manning is in a good position to be that kid. So cautious optimism.
It's insane that we're talking about a sophomore high school quarterback, though.
Yeah.
I mean, the celebrity behind it, all understandable. But Bryce Young has 2 years to tear up college football, and then whether it's Paul Tyson or Ty Simpson after him, there's still that much of a gap between Arch Manning being a quarterback in college football, and yet the excitement around his name is palpable. Is not even the word. It is that exciting when it comes to Arch Manning. But you mentioned the college football playoff expansion. I know you're not as big of a fan of it as I am, but it is kind of interesting, with the statement that Alabama's just going to be in it from here on out. Probably the truth. Interesting that it kind of coincides with Nick Saban signing that extension. In the face of all this evolution in college football, it's almost like it's the challenge that keeps him around. What else is there left for you to do? Well, to dominate this new era of college football with brand new rules. But with the playoff expansion, just your thoughts on it. Anything that you think is an overwhelming positive from it, and the biggest thing that you would like to change from the proposal that is going to be discussed over the next 2 or 3 weeks?
Yeah, for the most part, I'm a purist in this sport, and I love it for what college football is. And so my knee-jerk reaction to the expansion, because I was thinking we were going to get 8, right? I thought the general progression was 4 to 8, 8 to 12, right? But they said, screw it, we're going 4 to 12. And so my knee-jerk reaction was, man, I don't know about this, right? Kind of this participation trophy, whatever. And then I sat and thought about it some more. I said, hey, at the end of the day, right, the cream is going to rise to the top. The best teams are still going to come out of this, I still believe, because I just don't think we're going to get the upsets that we would get like March Madness style. Now, I think the games between the seeds 6 through 12 or 5 through 12, I think those are going to be entertaining, right?
Yeah.
So when we get down to the quarters, when we get down to the semis and then the final, I think the more blowouts are going to be even there because, out of the 14 playoff games that have already existed, Jacob, 3 of them have been within 2 touchdowns. 3 of 14, right? I'm not a math guy, but that's not a good percentage, right, in terms of competitiveness. But where I do like it is that it gets more of this country involved in college football. Because let's be honest here, man, and I know a lot of the listeners here, they might not have been able to step out into the Northeast or maybe even the West Coast or, maybe even the upper Midwest. Guess what? Not many people in those regions care too much about college athletics outside of them betting on it, right? And here's the reality is that, okay, you're going to get a team from, basically every year you're going to get maybe a Pac-12 team in there now. Okay, so now Colorado, Oregon, they're involved. USC, they're back involved. You're just going to get more parts of the country involved, and I think that's generally a good thing for the sport. Like I said, it goes back to being a money grab as well. And now that we're on to this point, the quarters, another big thing, the quarters need to be hosted by seeds 1 through 4. I don't understand why, 5, 6, 7, and 8 get to host and they get to generate the revenue for their campus for that first-round game. And then, okay, quarterfinals, we're just going to put them in the bowl game, right? No. I think the quarterfinal games need to be on campus because you're telling me how electric would Bryant Peak Stadium be, between – it would be – if Alabama was the 1 seed, between them or the 8, it would be 8 or 9. And if it was last year, it was the winner of Georgia-Cincinnati if it would have been a 12-team playoff last year. So could you imagine if Georgia wins that game, Georgia comes back to Bryant-Denny in December for a playoff game? My gosh. And Georgia was playing out of its mind toward the end of last year. So that would have been electric. So the quarterfinals need to be on the host side, seeds 1 through 4. And then, too, let's be honest here. The bowl season, I think we're really seeing the beginning of the end for the rest of the bowls that aren't in the playoffs once we get to the 12 teams, right? who really cares about the Cheez-It Bowl? Who cares about the Mayo Bowl? I mean, we know the opt-outs are there, and that's understandable because, what are they playing for, right? Especially if you're a prospect, you're a surefire NFL prospect. So the opt-outs are going to continue. They actually might be even more now, given, that if you miss out on the 12 teamer, right? If we already had people sitting down on the 14, I mean, we might have more guys sitting down if there's 12 teams in the playoff, and they're on the outside looking in. So those are a couple things. But now that I thought it out and I've kind of looked at the details, I'm actually for this because I still think the Clemsons, the Ohio States, the Alabamas, they're still going to rise to the top because there's more of a discrepancy between 1 and 4, than even 4 and 12, right? That's how big I think the gap is.
Well, hey, it's got to be hard for those later seeds, but nothing warms my heart. It puts a bigger smile on my face than you sounding just as excited as I do about the prospect of Georgia or Cincinnati last year coming into Tuscaloosa for a playoff game. You've come full circle, my man.
Yeah, no. Like I said, it would have been electric, right? I mean, and here's too. I think Cincinnati. I mean, hey, let's be honest here. That Cincinnati-Georgia game. Cincinnati won. Georgia ended up winning there barely. The field goal as time expired. I know Georgia had some opt-outs as well. But you think about it, right? I mean, that Georgia-Cincinnati would have been a great first-round game. And then I think Alabama, if Alabama had to play Cincinnati, I don't think that game would have been close. But I think Alabama and Georgia would have been very close. And guess what? And then, too, if you look at Alabama's part of the bracket, if it would have been last year, they would have had to either play Florida, Texas A&M again, or I think Coastal Carolina was the other team potentially in the semifinals. And let's be honest here. Is Alabama really signing up to go play Florida again? After playing Georgia quarterfinals, I would have been pretty upset, to be honest with you, if I was Alabama and then I got that.
You're listening to Southern Fried Sports with BamaOnline.com senior analyst Travis Reier on your home for Alabama sports. Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
Everybody.
Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
Lots of sunshine today, not as humid as recent days. The high for this afternoon around 90. Clear and pleasant tonight, the low 62. And we stay dry tomorrow and Thursday. Lots of sunshine both days. Highs between 86 and 89 degrees. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 90 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
The flagship station for Alabama Crimson Tide football.
Alabama touchdown.
Only on Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
Back to close down Southern Fried Sports here on Tide 100.9. Your home for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports. Got about 5 minutes left in the show, but we're going to go out to the Peterbrook Chocolatier hotline and welcome in JR. JR, what's going on, man?
Hey, brother. I want to follow up a little bit more on Bryce Young. I'm not as doubtful as I am concerned, and it is about his size. And maybe the height. The concern is more about his size. It's dreadful for me to even think about an unblocked outside linebacker hitting him on the blind side in a wide open run. Is he going to be able to withstand something like that?
Well,
is he tough enough?
I think he is. I mean, he didn't play powder puff ball out in California. He played with the big boys. Yeah.
Well, did he have a good track record as far as that's concerned?
Well, I can't imagine he got hit too many times, to be honest,
right.
when you're putting up the stats that he's putting up. But regardless, I don't think you come to the SEC unless you know what you're in for. And Bryce, he the one thing that does concern me is the example that you kind of brought up. In the A-Day game, Chris Braswell comes off the edge completely untouched and strip sacks him, touchdown, Crimson team. That's a little concerning. He also had the fumble when he got sacked against Missouri. But I mean, those are the lumps that come with being a young quarterback. I think once he understands that his athleticism can get him out of those situations, and he can create on the backside of that consistently just because he is that talented, then things will work out for him a little bit better on that end. But I don't think just being small means that you're susceptible to injury and not being able to withstand the schedule. I mean, look at Cam Newton 10 years into the NFL. He's bigger than everybody else in the league, and yet he's consistently injured. Ben Roethlisberger the same way. He's always dealt with injuries, one of the biggest quarterbacks of all time.
Right.
So it's not always about
he's one of the
size.
biggest. Therein lies one of the problems I'm talking about. Therein lies one of the biggest, and he's getting injured. Of course, that's pro. But these boys in the SEC, defensive linebackers and linemen that are coming in after him are not very small. They're generally going to have some size and speed on it. Now, one thing I wanted to ask, what kind of release is it? Is it a really good, quick release?
His release is tight, man. It's
quick. I understand
impressive.
that, but I mean, is it accurate when he has to do that?
Well, accuracy has a lot to do with anticipation and chemistry with your receivers. I think overall he's very accurate, and that's also, that was the number one thing that he was praised for, even over his athleticism coming out of high school, was his accuracy. But that's something you'll get a better feel on as we get into the season a little bit. But as far as like his motion, his and his release, I mean, it's one of the fastest releases in college football, I think. It's snappy, and it's got velocity too. I think his arm is stronger than Tua Tagovailoa's, which, I mean, by far and away would indicate that he's got the strongest arm that Nick Saban's ever had as a starting quarterback.
Is his accuracy good on the run?
Yes. Yeah, he's very controlled. One of my favorite things about him, too, just from watching him, was the ability to throw in awkward positions and still have a snappy release and still know where the ball is going. There's nothing erratic about Bryce Young, and that's what makes me feel the best. Like, even when things haven't gone his way, when things have been tough or questionable, there's nothing erratic. Like, he's still calm and collected. If not anxious, I mean, he wants to make the play, he wants to get it done, but there's nothing that's rattling him, which I think is comforting. JR, man, I appreciate it. I got to run.
Appreciate you, man. I know that I've run you out of time, but appreciate you very much. You got me all excited.
Hey, that's what I'm here for. Take it easy, man. And that'll do it for Southern Fried Sports here on a Tuesday. Thanks for hanging out with us today. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Tyler Martin from my show Off the Edge, which is Mondays and Fridays from 7 to 9 p.m. We'll be back for more Southern Fried Sports tomorrow at 11 a.m. Travis Reier will be back to take over the reins of the show. Coming up next is the Jay Barker Show right here on Tide 100.9, followed by The Game with Ryan Fowler and the extra hour of Alabama Tradition. Until then, take it easy and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody.